Good day everyone! I am Lorraine M.Talimongan from BSN 110 Aligood. So for today's activity, I am going to perform pig's kidney dissection. So let's start!
So first, what is the main function of kidney? The kidneys are two bean-shaped organs, each about the size of a fist. They are located just below the ribcage, one on each side of our spine. Their main function is to act like a filter to remove waste products, toxins, and excess fluids from our body, then transform them into urine. In addition, it controls our blood pressure, make red blood cells, and balance the pH level of our body. So now, let's examine the outside of the kidney. This is the ureter. The ureters are bilateral thin tubular structures that connect the kidneys to the urinary bladder, transporting urine from the renal pelvis into the bladder. The muscular layers are responsible for the peristaltic activity that the ureter uses to move the urine from the kidneys to the bladder. The renal artery. The renal arteries carry a large volume of blood from the aorta to the kidneys. From the heart to the kidney, the renal artery transports oxygenated blood. This is the renal vein. The renal vein is the main blood vessels that carries blood from the kidney and ureter to the inferior vena cava, a large vein that carries blood to the heart from the lower part of the body. Now we're done examining the outside of the kidney. Let's now cut the kidney in half lengthwise from the side. After cutting the kidney, let's now examine its internal structures. This is the renal cortex. The renal cortex is the solid-looking outermost part of the kidney. It contains many small arteries and veins that carry blood to and from approximately 1 million nephrons located in the cortex. This is the medulla. The medulla is the region located inward from the cortex. It includes the cone-shaped renal pyramids. These are fibrous or striped triangular zones in the medulla that contain the collecting ducts, which collect urine from the kidney tubules of the nephrons and the cortex. Between the pyramids are the renal columns that contains middle-sized arteries and veins that carry blood between the nephrons and the cortex and the renal artery and vein. The hollow area in the center of the kidney is the renal pelvis, which should not be confused with the bone called pelvis. The collecting ducts drain into the pelvis. From there, the urine passes out through the ureter to the urinary bladder. Unfiltered blood enters the kidney through the renal arteries and found in the hilum region and then branches off into the segmental arteries, and then it will go along with the spaces between the renal pyramids known as the renal columns. These blood vessels are known as the interlobar arteries, after which it will split off into the top or the base of renal pyramids known as the arcuate arteries. Then, it will further branch into the renal cortex as the interlobular arteries or cortical radiate arteries. These blood vessels serve multiple nephrons, where filtration of the blood occurs. Specifically in the glomerulus, blood is supplied to the glomerulus via the efferent arterioles. Once the wastes are filtered, blood exits the efferent arterioles and then diverges into the peritubular capillaries, which supply blood, a proximal and distal convoluted tubules, and into the collecting duct and into the vas aorta, which supplies blood to the loop of Henle. It will converge again in the cortical radiate veins or in the interlobular veins, then it passes through the arcuate veins. At the base of pyramids, This leads to the blood back to the renal columns and interlobar veins, which then goes to the renal veins in the hilum region before sending the filtered blood to the inferior vena cava of the heart. First is the glomerular filtration. It happens in the renal cortex. The origin of filtrate comes from the water in smaller solutes first to the capillary walls of the blood vessels and glomerular capsule first to the renal tubule. Second is the tubular reabsorption. It happens the moment when the filtrate from the capsule enters the proximal convoluted tubule. This happens again in the renal cortex. Useful substances in the filtrate or transform it out in the tubule and then return into the bloodstream to the adjacent capillaries. Majority of water reabsorption happens in the proximal convoluted tubule of the cortex. Lastly, we have tubular secretion. Hydrogen and potassium ions, creatinine, and drugs are further removed from peritubular blood and secreted by tubule cells into the filtrated. These secreted ions plus the filtered form the urine. The urine then flows out to the nephron tubule into the collecting duct, passing through the renal pelvis into the ureter, and then it will gonna go down on the urinary bladder so that it includes the pathway of the filtrate of the urine.